I'm Stephen Grudz, and I'm from the South African Institute of International Affairs here in Johannesburg.
Thank you, Stephen, for joining us. Elections have been the norm for years the world over, and Africa is not an exception. In light of this, what progress has been made since the 1980s in terms of African elections?
So I think they are held regularly, and generally there's been an improving standard. In the early days, there was a lot of accusations of cheating, of ballot box stuffing, of unfair elections, and I think the quality has improved. I think we also are seeing more elections. We're seeing more countries that have democratized and are holding elections. We're seeing stronger election management bodies like the IEC that we have in South Africa and others around the continent. I think courts are getting more involved in electoral cycles. And generally there have been improvements, certainly in the last 30 years.
Yes. In 2016, a lot of elections were held in Africa. What were the trends in your view, sir? So
we identified four major trends that happened last year. The first one is that there have been attempts by ruling parties to stay in power longer than they should be according to the constitutions. We've seen, not only last year, but throughout perhaps the last 10, 12 years, many attempts by different countries, rulers, to stay in power, to elongate their terms. Sometimes there have been term limits in constitutions which have been changed, and there have also been other procedures through parliaments that have tried to keep the executive in power longer than he or she should be. So that's been a worrying trend. There have been many successful attempts to change constitutions, and also some that have been not so successful. So that's one area. I think secondly, we've seen increasing levels of intimidation of opposition parties, the use of the security forces, and social media social media has been shut down often near or during elections and just afterwards, because I think ruling parties fear that there will be mobilization on the streets through social media. So we're seeing that civic space being cut down. The third area is in low voter turnout, and in fact what we're seeing is from previous years, lower and lower number of people going to the polls. The percentages in Africa are in general lower than the rest of the world. Nigeria, for example, of registered voters, only 43% actually turned up on voting day. That was in 2015. So we're also seeing low participation rates by women, by the youth, by the elderly, by people with disabilities, and many of them feel disenfranchised, or what's the point of voting because it's not going to change anything. And the other trend I'm just trying to think of, we'll leave it, maybe I'll come back to it.
Thank you, sir. In light of the issues that you have put forward, what proposals can you make for Africa to avoid disputed elections?
So I think the rules of the game need to be agreed by all the political parties. I think political parties need to become more mature and ready to accept the results, but that also means that electoral management bodies must be beyond reproach and must be credible and impartial, and so that you trust the rules of the game and those that are running the game. I think they need to try and control their supporters. Unfortunately, we have very competitive election systems, and the prize is big. If you're going to become a minister or a president, that can be your path out of poverty. So there's a lot at stake in our elections. I think also observation missions need to be a little bit more critical when they have to be. Often they are just legitimizing elections that have major problems. So I think that's something that needs to be relooked. Countries need to budget for their elections. I think we heard MPs saying how often they have to rely on donors, and that is a dangerous position to be in.
Thank you, sir, for your time.
Thank you.